And now we'll move on to our next session, which is the art of batting. And I would like to invite on stage Sanjeeb Mukherjea and also Jarrod Kimber, because this session is going to be about cricket. We have heard about all the sports here. We've talked about football, we've talked about hockey, and now it's time for cricket. Any cricket fans here? Well, of course. All right, thank you so much.
I think I scared her then. That's a way
Good
to start
evening.
your panel.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of hands going up the moment Yashika mentioned how many cricket fans are in the house. So let me, before introducing the gentleman to my left, let me ask him. He's known by the name Jarrod Kimber, but I believe his books are more in demand in Australia right now as we speak than right here, because the Ashes test has ended in 2 days. Where is the art of batting?
To be fair, Travis Head brought it out at the end, didn't he? So maybe after the third innings, someone gave him a copy of the book, and suddenly he's learned about batting. But yeah, it's pretty grim. The last couple of test matches, no one's made any runs. So hopefully I get some royalties in the future.
Right, so Jarrod Kimber, for all of you who haven't yet Googled him or do not know him, he's a very, very famous personality. He's a famous podcaster. He's a writer. He's one who still manages to speak his minds in cricket circles. He does a fabulous podcast. And most importantly, I'm sure all of you would remember, he crafted a superb film called The Death of a Gentleman way back in 2015. And now, what he's done, he's managed somehow to maybe extrapolate cricket numbers, facts, figures, and a little bit of imagination. And of course, excellent writing skills to put together what I would call his labor of love. He is better, I would say he would be in a better position to describe it. And this book is called The Art of Batting. All of you have read The Art of Captaincy, Mike Braley. Now here comes a man, Jarrod Kimber, born in Australia, living in England. I don't know how he manages to do that during the Ashes. Right now here with us as a guest of honor. Jarrod, first and foremost, the art of batting. How come? Because when we look around and for all seriousness, you look at Test cricket, the way it's going, you look at one-day cricket, you look at T20, you look at IPL. It's more about the art of battering and not the art of batting.
Yeah, I think this is maybe the moment when it's all changing, right? This is a hinge point in cricket. Politically, financially, cricket was socialist run and is now capitalist run. All these things are changing. And yet, people still have to go out there and face balls, right? Like, you watch what Travis Head just did, and I think that if you don't understand modern cricket, you think, oh, he just slogged and he got away with it. But there is an art and a craft to what he did. And batting has changed so much in the last 20 years that I felt that most of the old books on batting are more about the personalities who were good at it. I really wanted to talk about actually how people make runs, the science behind it, the motivation behind it, all these sorts of things. And so I thought it was almost the perfect time to write that book. It was something that once I got into, I got really obsessed with it.
How did you start off with this idea, and where did it all start?
It actually started with a basketball blog or podcast, which is a weird way for a cricket book to start. But I listened to these guys who ranked the greatest basketballs of all time in the NBA. And I thought, we don't really do that in cricket. Like, we have all these incredible players and we talk about them. And, you know, you and I, we work in cricket. We go to an event, someone finds out that we work in cricket. The first thing they do is come over and tell you who their favorite player is, right? But there wasn't really a system to tell you who should be the best, the second best, the third best. And so I was like, can that be done? Which, you know, arguably can't be done, but I gave it a good shake. And that's what I really wanted to do is tell that story of the greatest players of all time, how they got to be who they were. And then through the writing of that, I kind of forgot completely about the list. And then I just got obsessed with batting, you know, and I was lucky enough to speak to some of the greatest players of all time and just like pick their brains and be like, how did you do this thing that you did? And quite often when you talk to the best players of all time, they give you the worst answers. So then I went and found the batters who were a little bit worse. And I said, how did your friend do that thing that they did? And they take you through it.
Right, so we all of us sitting here in the audience, I'm sure we've all made lists at some point of time in our lives, be it about batsmen, bowlers, or people from any other walk of life. But the interesting thing, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, about Jarrod's book is that it's not just about a list. Now, he doesn't claim to list out the top 50 batters of all time. That's an impossible task. That's not what he's done. What he's done is sort of given a rank 1 to 50, but then he also brings in something called range. Now, I don't know how many students of statistics are here in this congregation, but if you could tell us, how did you do that? I mean, you placed maybe a Kane Williamson at number 52, but his range is from 37 to 55. Why don't you break it down for us?
Kane Williamson was higher than 52, by the way, before anyone starts heckling us. Yeah, so what I basically did is I looked at each player and I said, is there a case for a player to be as high as 15? And then is there a case for a player to be as low as 27? So I like certain things. So one of the things I really like is players who can change a game quickly, right? You might not care about that. You might be like, that doesn't matter all that much. I like players who are basically unimpeachable during their peaks. So people like Hashim Amla, Ricky Ponting, Virat Kohli. Other people like consistent batters who are good all the way through. So when you're coming up with the range, you're basically saying, you know, the way that we've looked at this is you could be as high as 18 and you could be as low as 32. We've put them at number 23 in our book, but you could make a claim that we could have pushed them higher or a little bit lower. And I think that's a lot fairer. And also, you know, myself and Sean, who also worked on the book, who's our researcher, we're not, you know, I don't think either of us, don't wave at me. Only talk when I ask you to talk. Neither of us would claim to be God, right? All we're really trying to do is put together the best case possible, and then we're saying, if you disagree with us, that's fine, because I'll be honest, the minute I put the list in, I was like, oh, I could change this. I could change this a lot. Like, and that's also, Joe Root kept making runs. Babar Azam stopped making runs. All these different things happened while we were making the book, and you have to factor that in, and so things keep changing. So players will keep changing as we learn more about them.
Right, let's try and make it a little bit more controversial. Let's spice it up, as one would say. Why is Stephen Smith ranked higher than Ricky Ponting? Explain it to us.
I just think he's a lot better at batting. I think Ricky Ponting had an incredible peak, as I said, probably 2001 to 2008. We might not have seen too many people in the history of the game be better than what Ricky Ponting did. But he wasn't particularly good when he was young. And he really dropped off at the end quite a lot. And probably, I think he says in his book, he played on for 3 years too long. You compare that to Steve Smith, who's had more plus years already than Ricky Ponting. And there's a period of time that I think Ricky Ponting put, I think he put his stamp on games, but he struggled in certain locations. There'll be people in this room that are already Googling what Ricky Ponting's average was in India, right? Steve Smith doesn't really fail anywhere. He's just incredible everywhere. And so, you know, those are the sorts of payoffs that you're looking for of maybe Ricky Ponting can change the game quicker than Steve Smith, but Steve Smith's done it for longer and more consistently.
So tell me one thing. When you're researching for a book like this, you put together a list of 50, and I'm sure you've researched many, many more.
84. 84 was the long list, yeah.
So who's the most notable exception who's not made it to your top 50?
Who's number 51? Is that what you're asking? Every player who's not on the list is number 51, because quite often I am asked this, and that's the easiest answer. It's probably between Graham Gooch and Adam Gilchrist. And I explain in the book that I tried to be as objective as you can be. Obviously, we all have our biases, but I tried to be as objective as possible. But I do believe that Adam Gilchrist helped save my life, and that I was going through a really tough time in my life, and I decided to kind of live my life in the style of an Adam Gilchrist innings, which sounds a bit insane, especially late in his career when he was.
Tell us more about it.
Yeah, and so what my theory was, I think I was terrified of failure, and so I looked at Gilchrist and I was like, well, he's not terrified of failure. Gilchrist would play the worst shot you've ever seen, shake it off, and then the next ball play the worst shot you've ever seen again. It didn't affect him the same way. And so the fact he's not in my list, I hope, proves to people that this is quite an objective way of doing things. But also, if you look at it from a cricket perspective, he batted at number 7, and that's basically cheating. It's like really easy batting at number 7. I can't give him any extra credit. Graham Gooch, who you're already upset about not being in the book, is someone who I think any cricket fan from 1970s through the 1990s will have seen Graham Gooch destroy their team at least once. But in between that, he was often quite horrible, and he didn't go very well. I love Graham Gooch as a player, and it hurt me not to put him on it. I think he's got the most runs ever of any professional cricketer. But there's a lot of good cricketers in the world, and sometimes you just don't make the list.
Right. So tell us, how do you, when you sit down to research and make sure that you have a list of this kind to be put in form of a book, what exactly are the parameters you look for? Like generally, if it's just plain Jane statistics, it's about runs, ball faced, maybe quality of opposition, playing home or away, the quality of bowlers, etc., etc., the position of the match where you're coming to bat. What exactly have been your parameters for this?
So we basically started by looking for people who'd scored, I think Cheyenne might need to nod at this, but I think it was 3,000 runs at an average of 44. And what we realized was there were no openers on the list, because openers, it's obviously, that's a real job, opening the batting. None of this batting at number 7 nonsense. And so we had to change it for them. And then we were like, well, this isn't fair to players who played in eras where it was hard to make 2,000 runs. So we had to change it for that. But yeah, what you said before is that's the sort of thing we're looking at. We're looking at how good you were against the best bowling attacks of your time, which is a reason why Kane Williamson is a little bit lower in our list. We're looking at, the median score that you came in. Like, you might have played for a horrible side, and so you kept having to go up the order, like Joe Root had for quite a few years. I think Brian Lara never had a batter in his side who, while he played with him, averaged over 45. Right? Whereas you compare that to Sachin, who had, even when Sachin had some bad teams around him, but he still had guys who could make runs. So you're comparing it to that. You're also looking at the quality of the pitches they played on, what other people did in the same games, what other people did in that era. And we kind of put it together. It's not a numbers-based thing, as you would know in the book. We sort of took it away from that, but we used numbers to get to a point where we could make a case for someone. And then you're like a lawyer at that point. You're literally going through going, well, this is the case for them, and this is the case against them. And you end up, and this is what I hate about lists, is you end up nitpicking greatness, right? Of being like, well, the problem with this guy is, he only made 300s in the 4th innings, right? And this guy made 6. And it feels unfair. But when you're comparing the best players of all time to the other best players of all time, it's tough at the top.
Absolutely. It obviously has been a labor of love. And you were just mentioning to me just before we came on stage that Jarrod intends this book to go out as a message, as if it is his love letter to cricket. Very nicely said. But Jarrod, tell me something. You've spoken to so many cricketers, and you've been able to pick their brains, the sort of access, which once you guys, ladies and gentlemen, you read the book, you'll understand immense access which Jarrod had with regards to these cricketers. Tell us about the things which we don't know. I mean, today in the days of the internet, there are so many backstories which are already available, but I'm sure there are many in this book, and many you might not have even written about, which you might as well share with us.
So one of my favorite stories is, I think most people in this room would know who A.B. de Villiers is, and very humble guy. And in the middle of talking to me, I don't think he meant this, but he suddenly went, oh, you got to understand that, well, if I'm seeing the ball, if I'm in my flow state and everything's working well, when Mitchell Johnson's bowling to me, he's bowling underarm. And the blood goes out of my face. I'm like, I've never heard a batter be that honest before. He's like, it doesn't matter who's bowling to me. I could see in the dark. I could see, but I know what you're going to bowl before you bowl, is essentially what he was saying to Mitchell Johnson, who in that series was bowling about as quick as anyone had ever done with the left arm before and was smashing people in the head. And you realize that this is not a normal human being that you're talking to. And there's a great story from this old cricketer I talked to who sadly passed away while we were writing the book, a guy called Bob Knocker White. And I talked to him specifically because he played for Middlesex for 10 years, Nottingham for 10 years, and then umpired for 30 years. So 50 years of standing on the field. He said to me, yeah, I never really had a real job. I just stood on the field. Sometimes I played, sometimes I umpired. And I was asking him about the players that he saw and played with. And he said that he would bat with Garfield Sobers. And he would say to Sobers, how did you do that? And Sobers would be like, it's easy. You just do this, 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 and this. And Bob Knocker White would be like, got it, got it. And he'd go back in the nets and he'd be like, okay, Garfield Sobers told me to do this. Bold. 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 And he'd come back to Garfield Sobers and he'd go, it's not working. And Garfield Sobers would be like, well, you're not me, are you? There's a different level. And I think, one of the things we really understood when writing this book was that Brian Lara and A.B. de Villiers were not the best people to talk to. The best people to talk to were generally the players who stood at the other end to people of that level. So, for instance, we were really lucky to talk to Chris Rogers, who batted a lot with Steve Smith and David Warner, Jimmy Adams, who batted with Shivnarine Chanderpaul and Brian Lara, and obviously grew up watching Viv as well. Even Rahul Dravid, who, Rahul Dravid is the only person I think who has complained about being too high in this list, by the way. But him talking about not just Sachin, but you get Rahul Dravid talking about Ricky Ponting. You see the fanboy come out in him so quickly. Kumar Sangakkara is another one when he talked about Aravinda de Silva or Brian Lara. And it's the guys who can kind of bridge that gap. Because I think AB de Villiers and Brian Lara really find it hard to just tell you how they do the thing that they do. Whereas once you get to the level of those other guys, they're like, this is how they do that thing. I tried to do it. It didn't work for me.
So in the midst of speaking to all these greats, you must have figured out one thing, that each has or had his own way of approaching the game, of mastering the craft. Maybe a couple of instances of a couple of cricketers who you thought were completely out of the box on the way they worked on their game, on their batting.
Yeah, I think one of the big things I learned during this book was motivation, right? You hear this when you hear young actors talking about acting. What's my motivation? And there's a great story about Aravinda de Silva. And once Kumar Sangakkara took me through the Aravinda stories, I was like, this makes sense why he didn't always make runs. Basically, he didn't care that much, right? But if someone from Australia, and it was generally, sadly for us, a fellow Australian who would say something to Aravinda, and suddenly that would just turn him into a superhero, because now he had someone to beat. And you hear these stories of him playing in Sri Lanka, and like literally he's got pastries in his pocket out on the field, and he's having a snack, and he's fielding at first slip, and the ball comes, and he gets out the way, and he goes, that's for you guys to get. I don't need to do this. And then someone on the opposition has a go at Aravinda de Silva, and suddenly he becomes Sachin Tendulkar for that day. And what Rahul Dravid said to me was, if you look at the difference between Sachin Tendulkar and Brian Lara, he said, Sachin found that inspiration, that motivation every single time. And Brian Lara was like, maybe not today. Oh, wait, the Australians have sledged me again. Or there's a world record to be had. And you realize that like sometimes it takes a lot to get those guys to actually lock in and do the things that you need them to do. And when they do, they take a whole nother level. So someone like Aravinda de Silva he's not in my book, but we talk about him a lot because he could have been. It's just that he had other things on his mind. He liked cars, man. He liked pastries. You know, he didn't like fielding.
Well, for more of those stories, you need to pick up a copy of The Art of Batting by Jarrod. But Jarrod, there's an interesting place in the book in which Rahul Dravid, if I'm not mistaken, mentions that, a comparison to today's batsmen and their days, the days gone by, as one would say. In today's days, even a franchise cricket, a batter has 3 or 4 throwdown specialists of all types. Rahul Dravid didn't even have the Indian medium pacers bowl to him in the nets. All he had was a worn-out Sachin Tendulkar bowling to him. Tell us more about it.
Who probably also had already been batting for 2 hours, right? So Sachin's done his job with the bat. The bowlers have obviously can only bowl so much, so they nick off. And Rahul Dravid has to face Glenn McGrath or Brett Lee or Dale Steyn or, Sean Pollock, whoever it is. And in the nets, he's got Sachin coming in and wobbling the ball at him. And what he was saying is that there was a fascinating thing a couple of years ago where we started seeing professional throwdown people, right? The Indian throwdown specialist, if you guys haven't seen it, it's hilarious. He takes a box with him because he's a little fella and he wants to get higher so he can replicate the height. There's an English guy, a West Indian English guy, grew up in both countries, who literally got a job because he could throw really fast with his left arm, not with his right arm. And so what Rahul Dravid's looking at this as a coach and just go, these guys are spoiled. Like, if I didn't get to the nets at the right time when Dravigal Srinath was bowling, I didn't get to face anyone. And so it's a completely different world now where you can be a professional throwdown person. I'm not sure if that goes on the business card, but that's essentially what these guys are. And so the preparation that a modern player has is so much different. But we have had stories of, Sachin Tendulkar digging up the pitch, right, so he can bowl, so he can replicate Shane Warne, or the great Victor Trumper in Australia, who was terrified of wet wickets, so he would take a hose out and wet the wicket, and then get people to bowl at him and try and hit him. We have had those stories. The difference is now we have like 20 coaches that can help you do that.
Absolutely, and what Jarrod has also managed to do, let me tell you, before you start reading the book, he's managed to place God at the number 2 position. By that I mean Sachin Tendulkar, because the god of cricket, Sachin is always number 1 the world over. But in your book, he's number 2.
And he's 2 to I'm sorry,
Don Bradman. You can't leave. But here's my question. It's not about Sachin being at number 2.
Stop saying that like it's a bad thing.
It's a list. It's a list. That's the fun part. Okay, he can be between 1 and 5. The range you mentioned yourself.
1 and 2 was his range.
All right, one and 2. He's not giving me much choice. But how do you put down somebody like a Don Bradman at number 1 in the sense, obviously, the Don is the Don. He's the greatest, everything. But how do you contextualize numbers, opposition, skill sets? How did you manage to do that?
It's really tough, especially with Don Bradman, because he only plays in England and Australia, whereas Sachin is the first cricketer that really plays everywhere, right? And you have that record. The main difference is that the second best player in Don Bradman's era was George Headley, who's like in the and Herbert Sutcliffe. They're both on the list, and they average around early 60s, late 50s, right? And Bradman averages 99.94, and he averaged 99.94. Whether he actually averaged more in England than he did in Australia. Every time he played, he made runs. We've never seen anything like that before. It's hard historically to understand, but also you have to understand that Don Bradman actually faced a similar kind of pressure to Sachin Tendulkar, just on a smaller scale in terms of the number of people in the country. But Australia was going through the Great Depression. People were really struggling for their livelihoods, and Don Bradman was the thing that everyone in Australia looked up. So any failure he had was a huge problem in Australia. And so, there's the famous newspaper things of he's out when he's actually failed, or, and all these sorts of things. So he carried a pressure that realistically only him and Sachin could probably truly understand what it is like to carry that many, the weight of a nation the way that those two did. But he did it while averaging 40 more than the second best player in the world at that time. And as I said, those guys that were second behind him and third behind him in that era were also all-time greats. We've never seen anyone like Bradman. Without getting to the metrics that we were talking about before, if you were to break through like the top 16 to 20 different metrics of how we worked out who the best batters were, like Bradman is 99th percentile in almost every category that you can look at. Like, he was motivated to make runs every single day. He had a technique that was incredible. He ran between the wickets in a period of time where mostly you had fat English batters who didn't even want to run. They weren't even interested. Like, he did everything. He was a professional almost 50, 60 years before we even thought about that in cricket.
Right. Before we wind this up, I'll throw it open to the house. Any of you have any questions for Jarrod Kimber? Please raise your hand. Identify yourself. Can a microphone be passed?
Do we have a mic?
As we wait for a microphone to be passed. Okay, just be loud enough. Identify yourself. Be loud enough. Come in front.
Project.
I'm Siddheshwar. I'm coming from Gurgaon. I'm a huge fan of yours. Post IPL, the last few years of Rahul Dravid was his, he just forgot to play outside off stuff. Or like after the evolution of T20, was this the death of the classical batsman truly started?
Do you mean with Rahul Dravid or with all players?
Generally with all players. They just forgot to drive the ball outside off.
So what has happened? This is such a boring, nerdy point, so apologies to anyone who's not a huge cricket fan. But what basically happens after Rahul Dravid retires is the bowlers change the angle that they deliver at. So when Rahul Dravid was playing, the idea was to get as close to the stumps as possible and bowl stump to stump, which meant the minute the ball's outside the off stump, you knew it wasn't going to hit the stumps. If you watch cricket now, watch how wide bowlers are getting to. And you got someone like Bumrah who bowls over his head, so even when he's not wide of the crease, everyone is trying to angle it back in. And that is about technology and DRS and Hawkeye, and it's basically changed the game. So you can't be as good outside off stump as you could be before. And to be fair, someone like Rahul Dravid is just a humble person, and he's very honest with that. The other thing he would say is, when he started coaching, he would say to all these guys, use your feet. Use your feet to the spinners. Use your feet. And eventually I said to him, we can't. They're bowling too quick now. The spinners have got quicker. So you can't be Rahul Dravid in this era. You have to be whatever your era allows for. And that's a really important thing for all players to understand. And the great ones do.
Go ahead.
We have seen that from 2000.
Name please. Please identify.
Shashwat Sharma. We have seen that from 2010. England haven't won the series in Australia. What do you can say about that?
Well, they're not looking like they're going to win one now for any of the youth. And big thanks to Sandeep, who put me on late enough that I could watch Australia win that chase really easily. I was a bit worried where it was like, you're going to have to talk on day 2. And then suddenly I was like, the game might be over on day 2. I'm in trouble here. I thought that England picked the wrong bowling lineup for Australian conditions. But if they were going to win the series, they had to win the first test. They should have won the first test, and they bottled it. They just put so much pressure on themselves for one series, whereas Australia's much more casual. Australia's like, yeah, we'll beat England, we'll try and beat India, we'll beat South Africa. We don't want to lose to anyone. And England, you watch Zach Crawley in that first over, and you're watching someone go, I have to be really good now, I have to be really good. And Australia's just a lot more relaxed because they don't put so much pressure on themselves. And I think that, I'm an Australian, obviously, who lives in England. You can't go anywhere without anyone talking about the Ashes. Like, they've got this 100 competition. They don't even notice it, right? Everything is about the Ashes. And where in Australia, it's much more about, we want to beat, and I can say this for my people, we want to beat everyone. We want to beat you, and you. Whereas England's like, we might lose to everyone else, but if we win the Ashes, it's great. For me, that's not the right way of doing it.
Anyone else? Please raise your hand.
Yeah, hi, right here. Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm Kushagra. So my question is, post 1970s, what do you think is the toughest batting era? I feel it's the 2020s, this one, but I'd love to see if it's the 90s or something else. What do you think?
Do you know, the 1980s, late 1970s to like mid 1980s is brutal, right? If you have a look at the best players in the world at that time, if they're averaging 50, it's barely 50. There aren't many of them as well. I think probably 2018 to 2022, I'm just going to look at Cheyenne to see if he nods. I think that's probably the toughest we've seen of recent times. So those are the two eras and you can be really unlucky. We looked at this. So Daryl Cullinan is a fantastic player, and he had two things happen to him in his career. He kept going up against Shane Warne, and he just couldn't understand Shane Warne at all. And he also happened to bat in the 90s when it was really tough on really tricky wickets. And so it could do that. But yeah, I would say probably the 80s and then the 2018 to 2022. It was tough.
Yeah, a quick follow-up. So why aren't there too many great tall test batters? I mean, there's Zach Crawley. He's not a great. There's Hayden, there's Peterson. But yeah, those are the three I can think of. Top of my head.
We've got Matt Hayden, Wally Hammond, Clive Lloyd, but there aren't many. So one of the reasons
Washington Sundar.
You have no idea. We can do. Can we do another 40 minutes on Washi?
We're already up.
I don't think he qualifies as tall though. So.
So traditionally, pitchers would start to keep low. So if you're tall, you actually struggle to get there. The other thing is that traditionally, people who were tall were pushed into bowling. And now we understand that the big step forward. So Zach Crawley's not a great player, but his height really helps him because he can step towards the bowler and change the length of the ball. So we're starting to see more and more tall batters come through. But if you go back and watch the NBA, and sorry to talk about basketball again here, if you go back and watch the NBA in the 80s, if you had a guy who was 7 foot tall, that's all they could do was be 7 foot tall. And now we have a guy who's 7'6" who can dribble the ball through his legs and shoot from half court. Tall people are just more coordinated now. Like for the rest of us who aren't at 6'4" and 6'5", it's really annoying. But good, well done to them for finally maturing as human beings.
Right, we are completely out of time. Unfortunately, can't take any more questions. But remember, Jarrod will be around, so you can just pile on to him. I have one final question, and I expect Jarrod to give me a very quick and honest answer. Jarrod, you've done so much of research, a fabulous book. It's already done so well internationally, and I'm sure a lot of us will enjoy reading this as much as I have. But between you, me, and the entire audience here, who's the better tail-end batsman? Is it a Courtney Walsh or a Jarrod Kimber?
I think Courtney is a lot better than me. He's got a great leave. Do you remember Courtney Walsh's leave?
Of course.
I could do 20 minutes on his leave. Just before we finish, I did have one thing.
I know.
Oh, were you going to throw to that?
There's the one.
You're such a professional.
There's the one.
I just wanted to say it's been a big honor to be asked out here. Obviously, I've been to India a lot of times. I haven't spent a lot of time in Delhi until this trip. But one of the reasons I accepted this so graciously was because they paid for my ticket. But the second reason that I accepted was I really wanted to come to Delhi and announce what my new book is. We just signed it with Penguin recently. The new book is on Virat Kohli, and I'm honored to be able to write a book on him. Now they clap.
Finally.
They didn't see where he was in the list, that's why. But yeah, it's a huge honor for me. I've been obsessed with Kohli from almost the moment he came out. I know he's very much a Delhi boy and everything else, so I'll try and do the best job I can. But yeah, so I thought, why not come to Delhi and tell you all that's why I'm here.
This is nothing new coming from Jarrod Kimber, because he's a person who's a gentleman who's used to barging into the ICC chairman's office. He makes news on his podcast. Now he's made news. He's writing a book on Virat Kohli.
I should say, I did. this is maybe the most nice thing I've ever done. I did actually contact Virat and say, is it okay? And he said, yes, but I'm not going to talk to you, which I think is more than fine. I mean, you like talking to me. Most cricketers don't.
Right, that's, thank you very much, Jarrod, and wishing you all the best. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Jarrod Kimber and his opening. It's not just the applause, but all of you must pick up a copy of The Art of Batting. And as we wait for his next publication on Virat Kohli and what exactly he finds out or he's able to manage to find out, we'll have another chat about Jarrod Kimber's bowling average the next time. Thank you very much to the organizers and everyone out here.
Well, thank you. That was a wonderful session, Sanjeeb and Jarrod. It was really nice to talk, to listen about cricket. And this one last question that I want to ask, and I want to, Sanjeeb, ask you also if it's appropriate to ask this question, that whether he has actually, or any of the cricketers has strongly reacted to your list. Have you made any upset? Has any cricketer been upset after seeing the list?
As I said before, Rahul Dravid was upset he was that high, but that's just him being humble. And don't you really hate nice people? They're really annoying. I heard that Geoffrey Boycott was told where he was in the book, and he wasn't very happy. But to be fair, Geoffrey Boycott hasn't been happy for 50 years, so I don't think my book was the thing that was going to make him.
That's rubbish.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if that's true or not as well. It could just be that everyone assumes that Geoffrey Boycott is not happy. But yeah, there's a couple of players that have maybe asked some questions about it. But I think once they see the amount of work that I've put in, they still don't care and they still moan.
I think, you know, just to add quickly, I think all the retired cricketers will surely read like Rahul Dravid. The current ones, I'm not so sure.
I'm not sure all the current players actually read. Is that what you say?
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. If you come, please come in the front for a picture. A huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, because this was actually our last session